Ever wondered why your golf balls seem to be practicing social distancing from the hole? Maybe it's not your swing, perhaps it's your logic that needs some refining. Logic, it's like the golf swing of the mind. It's not just about hitting the ball, it's about hitting it right. Each swing in golf, like each thought in logic, requires precision, understanding the rules, and of course practice. Without these, your ball is likely to end up in the water hazard of fallacies, just as your arguments might drown in a sea of illogical conclusions. Consider this. Each golf stroke requires a precise understanding of the club, the ball, the wind, the terrain. Similarly, each logical argument requires a precise understanding of the premises, the inferences, the context. Misjudge the wind's direction and your ball may veer off into the rough. Misjudge an inference and your argument may veer off into the rough too of absurdity. Now, just as golf has its rules, no moving the ball, no double hits, no grounding in hazards, logic too has its rules. And breaking them? Well, that's as frowned upon as wearing jeans on the golf course. In golf, one common mistake is not keeping your eye on the ball. In logic, a common blunder is not keeping your eye on the conclusion. You're so focused on your premises, on your argument, that you lose sight of where you're going and end up somewhere entirely different. That's like taking a swing at the tee and somehow ending up at the clubhouse. Then there's practice. You don't become the next Rory McIlroy or Tiger Woods overnight. It takes countless hours at the range perfecting your swing. Similarly, you don't become a master of logic overnight. It requires constant refinement of your arguments, identifying flaws and correcting them. So next time you're on the course, remember, a good swing doesn't just get the ball in the hole. It also teaches you the principles of logic. And maybe, just maybe, understanding logic might even improve your golf game. Just as you wouldn't swing your golf club without aiming, you shouldn't venture into an argument without understanding logic. Now imagine a golf course as a logical argument. The teeing ground, that's your premise. The hole, that's your conclusion. Just as every golf game begins with a strong swing off the tee, every logical argument starts with a solid premise. This is the initial position you take, the statement you're ready to defend. It's your first swing, your drive that sets the tone for the rest of the game, or in this case, the conversation. Now, the hole in our golf analogy is your conclusion. It's the end goal, the final destination you're aiming for. In a logical argument, your conclusion is the belief or idea you want others to accept based on your premise. It's where you want your argument to end up, the bottom of the cup, if you will. But don't be fooled, dear friends. Just like in golf, the distance between the tee and the hole in logic isn't a straight line. It's a winding path that requires precision, strategy, and a good deal of finesse. This path is your reasoning, the bridge between your premise and your conclusion. It's the fairway that guides your argument from start to finish. A good golf swing, much like a strong logical argument, requires a clear understanding of where you're starting, where you aim to go, and how best to get there. You wouldn't swing blindly on the golf course, would you? Similarly, in a logical argument, you need a clear premise, a sound conclusion, and a path of reasoning that connects the two. Of course, the goal in both golf and logic is to reach your destination in the least amount of strokes, or in the case of logic, fallacies. A logical fallacy is like a water hazard on the golf course. It's something you want to avoid at all costs. It can derail your argument and send you back to the drawing board, or in golf terms, it can add unnecessary strokes to your game. Remember, in golf as in logic, it's all about getting from point A to point B in the least amount of strokes or fallacies. Ever been stuck in a sand trap? That's like getting caught in a logical fallacy. Just as a golfer navigates a course filled with hazards, so too must a philosopher navigate the tricky terrain of logical reasoning. On the green, you have sand traps and water hazards, and in logic you have fallacies. But what exactly is a fallacy? Well, it's a mistake in reasoning that can sink your argument faster than a golf ball in a water hazard. Take, for instance, the fallacy of hasty generalization. This is like hitting a hole-in-one and then assuming you're the next Tiger Woods. Sure, you had a great shot, but it doesn't mean you're ready for the PGA Tour. Similarly, making a broad generalization based on a single piece of evidence is a surefire way to land your argument in a sand trap. Then, there's the slippery slope fallacy. This is like assuming that if you hit your ball into the rough once, you'll inevitably end up with a triple bogey. In logic, it's the assumption that a small step will inevitably lead to a disastrous outcome. It's like seeing a small puddle on the course and assuming it's an insurmountable water hazard. This logic only applies to government, and let's not forget the ad hominem fallacy. This is like blaming your caddy for a bad shot. It's easy to attack the person instead of addressing the argument, just as it's easy to blame others for our own shortcomings on the course. Finally, there's the fallacy of false cause. This is like assuming that because you wore your lucky socks, you played a great round of golf. Just like in logic, correlation does not imply causation on the golf course. Humor aside, understanding these fallacies is critical. They're the sand traps and water hazards of logical reasoning. And just as a golfer learns to avoid these obstacles, a philosopher must learn to navigate around these fallacies. Avoiding fallacies is like avoiding water hazards. It keeps your argument on solid ground. Just like in golf, the perfect swing in logic isn't about strength, it's about technique. Imagine stepping up to the tee. The fairway stretches out before you, a green carpet inviting your ball to dance upon its surface. You might think that the stronger you hit, the further you'll send it sailing, but any golfer worth their salt knows that's not the case. It's not about brute force, but the finesse, the technique. Now, let's apply that to logic. You see, when we're building a logical argument, it's not about how many facts you can hurl at your opponent. It's the precision of your points, the relevance of your evidence, the coherence of your reasoning. It's all about technique. Consider the golfer who swings with all their might but forgets to keep their eye on the ball. The result, a wild slice into the rough. It's the same with logic. If you present a barrage of unrelated facts, you're not driving your argument forward, you're just slicing off into the rough of confusion. Or think of the golfer who ignores their stance, their grip, their follow-through. They might get lucky now and then, but without the right technique, they'll never consistently hit the green. In the same way, a logical argument without clear premises, without a solid grip on reasoning, without following through to a justified conclusion, well, it's about as effective as a golf swing with a spaghetti noodle. So how do we perfect our swing in logic? Just like in golf, it's about practice. It's about refining our technique, honing our skills. It's about understanding the principles of logic and applying them consistently. It's about not getting caught up in the thrill of the swing, but focusing on the path of the ball, the trajectory of our argument. And just as in golf, the thrill of a well-executed swing, the satisfaction of seeing the ball land exactly where you intended, the same is true in logic. The satisfaction of a well-crafted argument, the thrill of seeing your points land and resonate, it's a joy unlike any other. So remember, the key to a successful argument, like a successful golf swing, lies in the technique. And finally, the 19th hole, where all golfers end up, regardless of how they played. The same goes for a logical argument. The 19th hole, the clubhouse, the final destination after an exhilarating day on the links. It's a place of reflection, of evaluation, and if you're lucky, celebration. And so it is with our logical arguments. Once we've taken our swing at presenting our case, we too must retreat to our metaphorical 19th hole. Just as golfers dissect their game, stroke by stroke, we must critically examine our arguments. Did we hit the sweet spot of our premises? Was our reasoning as smooth as a well-executed swing, or did we find ourselves hacking away in the rough of fallacies? These are the questions we must ask ourselves. And let's not forget the camaraderie of the 19th hole. Just as golfers share tales of glorious drives and tragic mulligans, we too share our argumentative victories and defeats. There's a certain charm in this. After all, where would we be without a little friendly competition to keep us on our toes? Now, I'm sure you're wondering, but what about the celebration? Surely, we can't compare the thrill of sinking a 30-foot putt to winning a debate. Well, I beg to differ. There's a unique satisfaction in constructing a solid argument, in seeing your premises align and lead seamlessly to your conclusion. It's akin to watching your ball sail through the air, arc perfectly and drop into the hole, a hole-in-one in the world of logic, if you will. So yes, there are celebrations at the 19th hole, whether they're for a well-played game or a well-argued point. And there are commiserations too. But remember, every round, every argument is a learning experience. So whether you're aiming for a hole-in-one or a flawless argument, remember the principles of logic are your caddy in this grand golf course of life.